emotions I'm feeling right now. The first of them is disappointment because the event is now confirmed to no longer be taking place when we thought it was going to. The language that's used in Ubisoft's blog post about the postponement is very clear about seeing if the Invitational can take place at a later date rather than just being outright cancelled. But if you've been a fan of Rainbow Six Esports for long enough, then you know how significant February is for us. It's the biggest event of the year, featuring the best teams from around the world with the highest stakes. And it might be something you're able to just pass off if you're not really that invested in the esport, but because we're also still in the murky waters of a pandemic, this is something we were looking forward to. It was probably going to help get us through what is still a really troubling time for a lot of people, and it's pretty demoralizing when you have to cut the hype train short when you were full steam ahead. But as much as I do feel disappointment and pain, the second thing that I feel is relief. A lot of things about the way that SI was being handled this year, especially behind the scenes, seems to suggest that it was turning into a shit show, especially as France tightened up its border restrictions, preventing travelers from outside Europe to enter, which was ultimately the final nail in the coffin for this thing to start on time. The first thing that I want to do is thank Ubisoft, ultimately, for trying as hard as they could to pull this thing off. They were under a lot of immense pressure since they confirmed a little while ago that they were going to hold SI as a LAN, not only because it was something that pushed the boundaries of any LAN event ever before held in Siege's history, with 16 teams now being 20, but it was already going to be happening in a different country while COVID-19 kept messing with things, and there was going to be a lot of backlash about Ubi trying to pull this off when they aren't Riot Games with truckloads of money trying to make worlds happen. So publicly, this was undoubtedly hard enough. Logistically, it had to have been a nightmare compared to previous years, and I'm sure that they were getting pressured by the orgs who were going, because that's not a prize pool nor a broadcast that you would want to miss out on if you were involved in it. Ubi had good enough reasons to try to push this as hard as they could, and even with the French government closing its borders just last week, they were still giving Ubi a chance until just 2 days ago when the offer was officially rescinded, and Ubisoft had no choice but to put all of their plans on hold. So credit where credit is due, and in this case, it absolutely belongs with the esports team at Ubi for trying to get this to happen with all of that pressure and the problems presented trying to organize travel while the world is still on fire. That is commendable, and I will never overlook your effort. But if you're asking me, this thing still kind of felt rushed. I'm not a fan of the COVID regulations that were listed in the original blog post, primarily because it listed a 7-day recommended quarantine for all travelers beforehand. Not only is that a super freaking easy rule to break if it's only recommended, but 7 days also doesn't really feel like it's that long if you're having people come from all over the world. And at least in North America, teams weren't scheduled to leave until 5 days prior to the event's start. So that 7 days already wasn't going to be met by some of them. I would have preferred it as a mandatory 7 days quarantine before the event, and maybe even a little bit longer than that. And I know it's a long time, but if you're going to try to hold this thing when the pandemic still yet isn't under control, then that needs to be a necessary sacrifice. They did amend this later by including a rule saying that if anyone got COVID, their whole team would be disqualified and sent home, but in my opinion, I still don't believe that enforcement was rigorous enough. I also don't like how late it seemed people were getting details, how broadcast talent wasn't even announced yet. That raises a whole other cadre of red flags. And how it also seems like Altiora is probably about to get cucked out of both their North American League and Invitational spots in the future. All of that needs a lot of clarification. With a situation like this, you can't get everything perfect. But if we can't have Invite on time this year, I certainly hope that all of this can be taken as a learning opportunity, and a lot of the criticism that has been directed towards Ubisoft by the community can at least be considered. Ultimately, this was a decision made because France wouldn't let people in, and I don't even blame France for doing that. Wear your freaking masks, okay? So then the question does become, what now? Well, for starters, I do think we're still getting some sort of announcement panel. Stuff like the Year 6 Season 1 reveal, esports announcements for the 2021 season, really anything that can be shown that isn't the tournament itself, because it's not happening, I expect will get its own stream, probably this week or next week. The earliest that we can see Rainbow Six competition again will probably be the start of the 2021 season in late March, and because Challenger League is probably going to happen alongside of it, the first time we see any meaningful competition might be Challenger League qualifiers a couple weeks before season starts. Problem is, that's in March. And I know that that's a really long time to wait, but that's just what we're looking at. But the problem is also trying to estimate when Invite might be moved to. The reason why the transfer window has been closed for this long was to ensure that teams would have to keep their current rosters for Invite, and you couldn't just move a team out and force a whole bunch of other players in if they hadn't earned that spot yet. It was a move made to keep rosters consistent, but the transfer window is going to open up sometime around the 22nd when Invite was scheduled to end, which means we'll finally start seeing official roster moves again. Remember when those were a thing? But it also means that no matter when Invite gets scheduled to, teams probably won't remain the same. And where the heck are you going to put it anyway? How can you plan for an international LAN event when the only expectation we have is that we might not get LANs back until like Q4 2021? What does that do to the 3-stage schedule that we have for this season? Is Altiora cucked? There's a lot of things that are so unknown right now, and I hate saying this, but we're just going to have to keep waiting. I am relieved that SI is not happening because it means we get to avoid a potential fiasco if this thing wasn't handled properly. I'm happy that my friends don't have to worry about traveling in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm also happy that the general response to this from the community on Twitter, Reddit, everywhere seems to be mostly positive and understanding. That's a really good thing to see. But I am also disheartened because, like a lot of you, I was really looking forward to this. UB made the right call. Thank you for trying. Needless to say, the rest of those breakdown videos are either not going to come out until the event is rescheduled or just won't be coming out at all. And a lot of the prep that I did for those will probably need to get changed up because if some teams are a little bit different, then a lot of what I've written will also be different as well. So, yeah, that's just where we are. I'll see you later. Peace.